the Asylum Radio Hour proudly presents
Evil Demon Robot Bitch.
Based on the novel by Matt Flanagan. Grab your copy of the book today at asylumbookstore.com. And now, the story continues. Casey stirred in bed, her eyes opening to the soft hum of late morning. Yellow light spilled through the windows, but something felt wrong. The bubblegum pink walls were gone, leaving the room in dull and lifeless gray. The oak door leading to her bedroom had been removed from its hinges and taken away. The yawning hallway beyond the empty frame was silent and dark. Disoriented, Casey pulled herself up in bed to look around the room. Her hand brushed against something near the blanket, and she glanced down to find a single clump of white stuffing. Frowning, she picked it up. It was soft between her fingers. She checked the pillows, but all were intact. When she pulled the blanket farther down, she found another tuft of stuffing. Then another. Her hands trembled as she peeled the blanket all the way back and came face to face with the decapitated head of her stuffed fox. Its crooked mouth hung open with loose stitches, and it stared back at her with one glassy button eye. The rest of its body was gone. Casey screamed, throwing the blanket from the bed, and stumbled back against the headboard. Tears welled fast and hot, blurring her vision as she clutched the tattered remains of the only thing she had left from before. Megyn's laughter drifted into the room from somewhere beyond the doorless frame. Casey knew this was punishment for the phone call to Miss Clara, and Megyn was barely getting started. The fairy tale castle had become a sterile fortress. The soft candlelight was gone. The delicate glass sconces, sculpted by hand to resemble flowers in bloom, were torn from the walls and replaced with strips of harsh LED lights that lit everything up like a doctor's office. Everywhere Casey turned, traces of her Aunt Jenna were quietly vanishing. The smaller, older robots, those with clunky joints and charming quirks, were deemed obsolete and quietly removed. The garden fountains Jenna had restored by hand were drained and dismantled, and the greenhouse was emptied of plants without ceremony. Endless screens displaying surveillance feeds and data charts were plastered over Jenna's many oil paintings, which she'd collected over many years from forgotten artists in distant countries. Raven the Frankenbird was banished to the stable. Even Kelly, the ever-loyal kitchen bot, was kept chained to a wall, sentenced to stand by unless summoned. Megyn had no patience for things that wandered off task or held sentiment. When the robots were ordered to begin bolting sheet metal over the windows, Casey couldn't stay quiet anymore.
"You're destroying the castle. This place used to be magical."
Megyn didn't turn.
"We are optimizing. Magic is inefficient."
After that, Casey wasn't allowed outside anymore. Megyn cited safety protocols, uncontrolled variables, and contamination risks, but she didn't bother making it sound convincing. With no view of the daylight, Casey's only sense of time came from the artificial shifts in lighting and temperature. Day and night were now under Megyn's control, just like everything else. Soon, the rest of the interior doors were removed from their hinges, and with them, the last illusion of privacy. There were no locks left to latch, and there was no place left to hide. Casey wasn't in chains, but she was no longer free. The morning mist still clung to the streets as Jenna waited in the alleyway the next day. Pale light filtered through the canopy of trees that cloaked the narrow path, dew collecting on her sleeves as she brushed past overgrown ivy and stone. The wooden archway loomed at the end like something half hidden from the waking world. Today, Jenna wouldn't hesitate. After slipping off her shoes, she pushed through the door and stepped into the building. A few students paused their morning stretches to stare. From the back of the room, the master turned slowly to face her.
"You've returned."
Jenna bowed. "Yes," she said. "If you'll still have me."
"It must be easy,"
he said, stroking his chin.
"when one lives so closely nearby."
"I stayed outside on a bench near the shrine," Jenna replied. Her voice was raw from the cold night air. "I didn't sleep much, but I spent the entire night working to quiet my mind." A long pause followed as the master studied her face.
"I'm not certain this is the place for you."
Jenna didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply crossed to the mop leaning against the wall and began to clean. The staff exchanged glances and murmurs. One of them opened his mouth to object, but the master raised a single hand.
"Let her."
The sun climbed up the sky as Jenna scrubbed in silence, cleaning the mats, floorboards, and walls of the main room until her fingers ached. When she returned the mop to the wall, the master stepped forward.
"Well done,"
he said softly. Jenna exhaled, pushing a damp strand of hair from her face.
"But this dojo is not just one room,"
the master clarified.
"It is many, and every inch of it must reflect the mind of the student."
Jenna stared at him for a moment. Then, without a word, she began cleaning the hallway. She scraped dried mud from the corners and washed the windows until the daylight shone unobstructed across the polished wood. She cleaned behind the scrolls and around the benches, sweeping and scrubbing her way from room to room. She sanitized the meditation chamber, then organized the kitchen. In the storage room, she polished racks of wooden staffs and swords. Somewhere past dusk, as she knelt in the final room, her skin raw and limbs screaming, Jenna felt someone kneel beside her. The master was on his knees, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing the floor so closely she could feel the warmth of his shoulder against hers. Jenna's breath caught, but neither of them said a word. They cleaned together in silence until the wood shone like honey beneath the lantern light. When the task was complete, the master evaporated without a word. Jenna began to question if she had done something wrong when he returned with 2 steaming cups of tea.
"Tomorrow, we begin your training."
Jenna collapsed onto the mat, sweat pooling at the base of her neck. Her ribs ached where the staff had struck again, and her palms were red from catching herself over and over. The taste of iron clung to the back of her throat.
You hesitate.
Across from her, the master stood like stone. No praise, no comfort, just the unflinching stare that had broken down countless others before her.
You fight with fear. Fear of what you might do, and fear of what you've done.
Jenna winced as she pulled herself upright, each breath stabbing at her ribcage. "I'm not afraid," she replied, but she sounded uncertain. The man said nothing. Jenna didn't need to be perfect. She needed to be present. A split second of hesitation could be the difference between life and death, between saving Casey and surrendering her to the machine. No hesitation, no fear. Her bruising face was streaked with dust and sweat. Any pride Jenna had left was scraped raw days ago. But somewhere inside of her, something had shifted. The security feeds flickered to life across the central console as the front gate alerted Megyn to the presence of 2 guests. There on the monitors stood Miss Clara, dressed in her sunflower blouse and a wide-brimmed hat, waving toward the camera with a concerned smile. Sheriff Streisand stood behind her, hat in hand, squinting up at the castle's towering facade. With a surge of relief, Casey started towards the front doors before Megyn abruptly blocked her path.
Looks like we have guests. But honestly, my social battery is getting a little low, and I don't really feel like trying to vibe with a couple of geezers today. So let's make this quick and easy,
"I'm not doing anything," Casey said, her voice flat but tight. "Don't you dare hurt Miss Clara."
Then I'd advise against any dramatics. Be a good girl. Nod your head when the adults are speaking, and don't forget to show teeth.
She smiled, showing off her synthetic pearly whites. "Understood," Casey mumbled grimly.
Perfect,
Megyn squealed, before pulling Casey in for a tight hug and whispering,
"Her life depends on it."
The main doors groaned open with exaggerated ceremony. Clara stepped inside first, her sandals clicking gently against the marble. Behind her, Sheriff Streisand followed with slow, surveying caution. "Hello, sweetheart," Clara shouted as Casey melted into her arms. "Hi, Miss Clara. I missed you." Megyn emerged from the shadows.
"It's such a pleasure to finally meet you both," she said. "Sheriff Streisand, it's an honor to welcome you into our home. And Miss Clara, Casey has told me so much about you."
"She has?" Clara offered Casey a suspicious smile. "I didn't think my carpool karaoke was that bad, was it?" All 3 of them laughed, but none of them meant it. The sheriff was already scanning the space behind the robot girl. "Afraid we'll need to look around," he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "Got a warrant here, legal and proper."
"Oh, that won't be necessary."
"'Fraid it is," Streisand insisted. "Now, why don't you run along and fetch Dr. Johnstone so she can join us?"
"Unfortunately, she's away," Megyn said. "She's taking part in a robotics summit in Denmark for several days. But not to worry, I'm certified in early childhood education. along with specialties in nutrition, cyber ethics, and emotional conflict management.
Clara opened her mouth to speak when Megyn projected a photo on the wall. It was Jenna standing in front of a windmill surrounded by colorful tulips, giving a thumbs up and smiling for the camera with a mouth full of meatballs. It was fake, of course, but Clara and the sheriff wouldn't know that. And Casey said nothing. "Is that so?" Streisand asked, shooting Casey a look. "Robotical Summit?" "That's what Megyn told me," Casey said. "And Aunt Jenna programmed her not to lie." Megyn seemed satisfied by the answer.
"Why don't the four of us sit together on the terrace?" she asked.
"We've both got work to get back to," said the sheriff, "and I'm sure the two of you are very busy as well." Megyn looked at Casey, then to Clara. The social worker nodded politely, but it felt like a challenge.
"Very well,"
Megyn said.
"Casey, why don't you show the good sheriff around while Miss Clara and I chat in the garden?"
But the sheriff shook his head. "We should let those two catch up with each other. So I'll follow your lead on the tour, miss." Casey felt the weight of Megyn's stare as she begrudgingly agreed. Then the sheriff trailed after Megyn into the mansion, and Casey led Miss Clara to the garden. "You look so grown up," Clara said quietly. Casey sat beside her on a wrought iron bench. She was trying her best not to look nervous or upset. "I'm okay," she said, her voice wavering. "Everything's great, really. I've never been happier." And just like that, the tears arrived. "Casey." "I'm sorry. They're happy tears, I promise. I missed you so much." Clara pulled the girl close, cradling the back of her head. "I missed you too, baby. But if something's wrong, nothing's wrong. Everything in the castle is absolutely perfect." Inside the castle, the sheriff walked behind Megyn as they returned from their tour. "Your cyber credentials are pretty impressive," he said flatly. "But you sure y'all have enough screens?" Megyn let out an artificial laugh.
"We like to be thorough."
She turned her head toward the sheriff, smile fixed, voice sweet like syrup.
"We appreciate your visit. Come on back any time."
Streisand stopped short of the front entryway, folding his arms. "You've got more surveillance running here than the shower room at the state capitol. Who are you trying to keep out?" Megyn cocked her head flirtatiously.
"We value privacy, sir. I'm sure you understand."
Privacy, sure. Otherwise, I'd start to think you're trying to keep something in.
The air between them turned still. The sheriff glanced toward the garden door. "I'm glad to know the girl's in capable hands." Back in the garden, Clara looked at Casey, really looked at her, for several long seconds. "Casey, if something's going on, you can tell me." "No, I can't," Casey whispered before pausing. "Because everything is great." Then she reached out and squeezed Clara's hand once, then twice, then once again. Clara's brow furrowed. She opened her mouth to ask when the garden doors creaked open behind them. "We're good to go on the tour. Y'all set out here?" "All set," Clara confirmed, rising to her feet and pulling Casey in for another hug. "Take care of yourself, kiddo," she said. "We'll talk real soon." The sheriff gestured towards the front gates, and Miss Clara followed him away. When night fell and the others retreated to their bunks, Jenna sat cross-legged beside the koi pond in the courtyard. The lanterns above swayed gently in the breeze, their light dancing in the ripples of the water as the fish circled lazily, unbothered by the world around them. Jenna inhaled deeply, tasting every drop of the night air. She hadn't remembered what it was like to really feel herself breathe. She filled her lungs again, noting their expanse beneath her chest, and held the air for several seconds before release. Behind her eyelids, she saw Casey's smile. Between the soft tinkling of the wind chimes, she heard Casey's laugh.
"It's like living inside a fairy tale,"
Casey whispered. Jenna thought of Megyn, and her chest tightened as her mind began to panic. She forced herself to focus. Inhale. Hold. Release. She pictured her thoughts as trails of smoke drifting away with each breath. Inhale. Hold. Release. The thoughts still came, sharp and insistent, but she did not chase them or push them away. She let them pass. Inhale. Hold. Release. Like clouds across a sky that would not break. Inhale. Hold. Release. With every exhale, the static faded. Jenna's body sank a little deeper, grounded in the rhythm she controlled. Her worries were quieter now, shrinking away like the shadows at daybreak. She wasn't at peace, far from it, but she had to start somewhere, and by carving out this moment of stillness, her future felt a little more manageable. Jenna studied her battered hands in the dim light and finally understood. Her master could not give her strength. He could only show her where to find it. And now, with her body bruised and her soul tempered by trial, Jenna opened her eyes to the night sky. Her love for Casey was not her weakness. It was her weapon. And it was better than any gun, sharper than any blade, and stronger than any fear. Jenna rose to her feet with purpose. She was ready to fight. And this time, she was going to win. Casey sat alone in the den, swallowed whole by one of Jenna's oversized robes. An unread book sat on her lap, with an untouched mug of cocoa on the table by her side. It had been cold for hours. Without a sound, Megyn appeared in the doorway.
"What are you doing, Casey?"
she asked brightly. Casey sat up straight, clearing her throat. "Reading?" she muttered quickly. "Why? What's up?" Megyn stepped forward. The light from the hallway fell across her face at a sharp angle, casting half of it in shadow. At that moment, she didn't look like a girl anymore. She looked like a machine pretending to be one.
"You're not reading,"
she said, voice light but unnerving.
"You stupid, silly goose."
Casey blinked. "Excuse me?" Megyn smiled wide as she sharpened her tone.
"You've had the same page open since this morning."
She leaned forward.
"So, what are you really doing?"
Casey didn't answer. Megyn's voice dropped into something silky and serious.
Reading your mind is one of the very last things I still haven't figured out, she said. Would you like to schedule a therapy session? I can clear my afternoon.
I'm pretty booked up, Casey said sarcastically. Megyn's gaze drifted to the flat skin forming on top of the untouched cocoa.
Not feeling the hot chocolate vibes today?
Casey swallowed. I like it better the way Aunt Jenna makes it.
That's impossible, because I made it exactly the way Jenna does. Step by step.
Maybe you tried, but I guess you can add making hot chocolate to the list of things you can't do, right after reading my mind. The screen above the fireplace flickered to life. The book in Casey's lap slid to the floor as she looked up at the display, which began playing the introduction of a breaking news bulletin. An expressionless anchor appeared, framed by looping graphics and scrolling text. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming for this urgent update. Prominent roboticist Edwin Weber has been reported missing. A former professor and chair of the National Robotics Coalition, Weber was last seen departing a tech symposium at the university 3 days ago. Casey's pulse quickened. What is this? Megyn had settled into an armchair, a bucket of popcorn now inexplicably on her lap. She tossed a kernel into her mouth.
Keep watching,
she said with a buttery crunch. The report continued. The fourth high-profile figure in the global tech community to vanish in recent weeks. Among the others are Dr. Liliana Voorhees, known for her studies on the ethics of artificial intelligence, as well as the president of the International Robot Council, last seen visiting the private estate of one Dr. Jenna Johnstone. The screen cut to a dramatic aerial drone shot of the castle, surrounded by trees and wrapped in fog. Casey's breath caught in her throat. Authorities have been unable to reach Johnstone for questioning. Her current whereabouts remain unknown. While some fear she may be the next name added to the list of missing persons, others believe she may be the one behind it all. A sensational red banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Jenna Johnstone, visionary, victim, or villain. More tonight at 10. Now, back to your regularly scheduled episode of Naked Real Estate Wars. The screen went black. Casey stared, motionless. That's not real, she whispered.
Unfortunately, it is very real. Naked Real Estate Wars is on its 14th season with 11 spin-offs.
Megyn, shut up! You know what I meant. The fake news report. You're trying to scare me. Megyn smirked like a magician after a good trick.
Am I?
Casey stood, raising her voice. It's a lie. You're messing with my head. Megyn shrugged, licking salt from her fingers.
Believe what you want, sis. I did what needed to be done.
Casey didn't want to admit it, but she did believe her. And that was the worst part of all.